Hello, welcome to Loremaster Library, the show where we look at the real world and attempt to inspire for your tabletop games. This month is some of the greatest wars in history to potentially inspire large-scale conflicts at your table. Today we stay in Europe and look towards the largest of the many wars between the rivals England and France, the 100 Years' War. Most people who are watching me probably do not need an introduction to either of the competitors. France and England have by and large remained two of the major world powers since the Middle Ages, even if some have had their fortunes wax and wane. The difference is that it is only modern times where they have been staunch allies. Until the 20th century, they spent more time at each other's throat. But their borders were very different from what they are today. England holding claim to various mainland duchies, in part from when William the Conqueror, a Norman from the mainland, conquered and took control of England. And likewise, Aquitaine, a duchy which remains independent, had been ruled by Eleanor, who during her life was married to both the French king and the King of England. Aquitaine was one of the war's flashpoints, the region both sides had the claim of descendants from. When the idea that the French throne could not pass through daughters was accepted, it led to the inevitability of a king dying with no male heirs, the closest in this case being the King of England. However, the idea of being ruled by an Englishman, and one whose mother is said to have put him on the throne through murder, was not popular among the French, and therefore excluded him from his ability to inherit, which he accepted for now, with him withholding the rights to various disputed territories. Though in the alliance which formed between the French and the Scottish, and you find yourself with a recipe for war. Eventually, sheltering the Scottish leaders led to a breakdown in diplomacy between two sides, and the French claimed Aquitaine. This was followed by proclamations that the then French king was not the true heir, and the French throne belonging to the King of England. So began the first phase of the war, known as the Edwardian phase. The English quickly decimated the French fleet and gained control of the English Channel, ensuring protection for many counter-invasions by the French. Then, truthfully, this cost the English financially, enough that they would not have been able to continue the war if a succession crisis had not broken out in Brittany, one of the mainland duchies of France, which they ended up using as a foothold in the region. The English moved quickly, capturing the city of Caen in a day, and taking the city of Calais, which would remain an important port for the English even after the 100 Years' War ended. France faced two marches of death across its land, the Black Death and the Army of the Black Prince, one of the famed generals of the era. They then had an overwhelming victory at the Battle of Poitiers, sending French nobility in disarray. The king, seeing this as his opportunity, tried to coronate himself King of France at the cathedral in the city of Reims. However, the city's defenses held out for 5 weeks, long enough for an event known as Black Monday. Without warning, a freak storm appeared out of nowhere, killing at least 1,000 of the English soldiers, and forcing both sides to the negotiation table. So the first peace came about, which England had the upper hand in after having captured the French king in one of their many battles. Even after the king was ransomed, the French needed to focus on putting down rebellions in their nobility. So both sides worked again on building up their military, with the first phase having ended in an English victory. The second stage came from neither England or France, but Spain. The Black Prince was called in to assist in the civil war in Castile, but because of the combat, needed to levy a heavy tax in the English holdings, including those on the mainland. taxing the holdings did not want to pay. So they appealed to France to keep them from needing to pay. One thing led to another, and soon the war was heating up again. This time the English were not as fortunate in their wars. Both the king was elderly and the Black Prince was ill, and the heir to the throne after both of them at the time was only 10. The French adapted a strategy of avoiding conflict, cutting off the English forces from supplies and attacking when they were weakened. Of course, on their side, the French heir was but 11 when the king died, and the battle actually happened in the French territories, which led to disorder, but which was not helped at all by the fact that they were still under the effects of the Black Plague. The second phase fell apart more than it ended. Both sides dealt with their own succession crises and high taxes, so it eventually fell to a period where England and France had little strong control over the region. The local lords, who showed nominal deference to the crowns, instead became the strongest powers for a few generations. Though the fighting did continue, it was through hiring pirates to raid each other's coasts, to avoid breaking out in another stage of open war. But eventually the third phase, known as the Lancastrian phase, began. It started out as an attack by the English, which seemed doomed to fail because of the French's same strategy to weaken the army. But then the French were successful in Agincourt, a battle with all of the factors against them, and it caused a devastating French loss, including 40% of the French nobility at the time. The English were set to succeed, using their bowmen to marked efficiency to continue to succeed at their conquests. It reached a point where the King of France, who at that time was touched in the head, allowed the King of England to marry his daughter, which had it specified that their children would be the French heirs, and then proclaimed the then Dauphin, the heir to the French throne, illegitimate and unable to inherit the throne. It seemed that the English were finally victorious. But then, a single young girl approached Dauphin, a girl by the name of Joan of Arc. She, claiming to hear the voice of God, petitioned him to send her to the front lines, to one of the towns that at the time was under siege, Orleans. She emboldened the troops, allowing them to lift the siege, a wave of morale they used to take several English strongholds. This allowed eventually for the French to push to reach the city of Reims, where the Dauphin was coronated as Charles VII. The English pushed back, killing Joan of Arc on a stake and formally coronating their king as the French king. But the French never lost their momentum, allowing them not just to retake the English holdings, but also to centralize the government, giving them formal control of the region, and allowing them to build one of the strongest armies in the world at the time. While officially the war would still continue for another 20 years, the English had several problems at home and were unable to re-establish a push on the mainland. From that time, the ties of England and France were formally cut, even in language, each stopping using and teaching each other's languages, except to diplomats and scholars, of course, still need those. But just as important, the war shaped each into the form of modern centralized states in their own forms, just 100 years before the discovery of America. Which brings us to the end of today's episode. We have gone through 2 major European conflicts, so next time, let's go across the world to see one of the famed battles there. See you then.